A little bright here tonight in Houston. I just arrived at Champions Club. I'm excited to play tonight. I'm hoping that I play well. I feel like I've been playing pretty well the last couple weeks, but definitely not playing my A game the last couple months. If you've seen some of my recent shorts, I've definitely played some hand suboptimally, but tonight's a new night. I'm excited to crush it. I'm going to focus on taking time on every decision and just staying mentally sound. I feel like some of my suboptimal play has been a combination of just some mental leaks over an extended downswing and just overall fatigue, having a newborn, and just some other stressful events in life. But like I said, I'm going to focus on playing very well tonight, and I'll see you guys on the other side. I start off the session with the big blind defend versus ties button open to 40. The flop gives me an open ender on the 8 of hearts, 4 of spades, 2 of spades. I check the tie and he uses a large size of $60. This board slightly favors me, but I still expect tie to be continuing here pretty often, as we both have very wide ranges. Overall, I do have some nut hands that do want to play a raise here, hands like pocket 8s, 4s, and 2s, as well as 8-4 and 4-2 suited. I don't think I'm quite as wide as 8-2 suited. I raise it up to $225, and he makes the call. I'd expect a lot of his pairs to continue here. He's going to be folding some 4x and 2x. He shouldn't have too many straights here. I'm not sure if he continues with hands like 6-5, but he will continue with ace-5 and ace-3. Obviously, all the spade combos continue, and I think it's likely that he continues with his good heart combos, something like ace-queen of hearts. The turn brings the 8 of spades, which is a very interesting one. Generally, on flush completing cards, I'm going to be sizing down here. As the nut advantage equalizes, I'm going to have a lot more flushes, but my opponent has a higher concentration of the ace-high flushes, and sets in 2-pair diminish in strength. This isn't quite the case on this board pairing flush completer, which I should actually be using larger sizes on, as I do retain the nut advantage. But in the moment, I wasn't fully aware of that, so I did continue for a small size of $175. Really just trying to apply pressure to some of his ace-high combos, whether that was with a straight draw or a backdoor flush, as well as a lot of his overpairs. Obviously, overpairs with a spade are going to continue, as well the weaker pairs that contain a spade. I expect him to continue here with his 8x combos, and a decent amount of flushes, which I do think will just be playing as a pure call. He does make the call, and we go to the river, which is the queen of clubs, and I think it's time to apply a lot of pressure with my 5-high. I continue with an overbet of $1,200, really trying to tell a story that I have a full house or the nut flush. I think it's really hard for him to continue with all of his overpairs as well as his 8x combos, so I do expect to get a lot of folds here. He tanks for a few minutes and he ends up showing the 8 of diamonds before he mucks, and I get this massive bluff through to start the session. I open up ace-queen offsuit under the gun, and as is standard in Houston, everyone wants to see the flop. There's a call from middle position, cutoff, button, small blind, and the big blind, and we go 6 ways to the flop with the pot already at $380. The flop's a really good one for my hand, but not necessarily my range, with the 10 of clubs, 8 of clubs, 7 of clubs. In general, I'm going to be checking this board the vast majority of the time. I have a lot of overcards that completely whiff this flop, and a good portion of my hands that were nutted pre-flop, like jacks plus, typically hate this board, especially if they don't have a club. Overall, I'm not going to have too many flushes when I open under the gun. It's really just the suited broadways and some suited ace-x combos on this flop, while my opponents, especially in the blinds, have a lot more flushes, with a lot of king-high, queen-high, jack-high combos, as well as those weaker suited connected hands. My opponents are much more likely to have hands like straights and 2-pair as well. With all that said, even though I have the ace of clubs, I do think I want to be playing a check here. But when it checks to me, I oblige, and it ends up checking around. The turn does bring the 3 of clubs, giving me the nut flush. And now I think it's time to start building a pot. It checks to me, and I use a size of $175. I think in hindsight, I'd like to use a larger size when the flop's checked around and the 4th club's on the turn. And I lead out here with a bet into 5 people. I think I'm already extremely polarized, and my sizing should reflect that. So I think I want to go at least 275. For the most part, my value is just going to be the ace and king of clubs. And I think my bluffs are going to come from 3 different categories here. I'm going to have some nonsense hands like ace-4 of diamonds. I'm going to have some weaker pocket pairs, usually the ones that do have a club. I block some of the flushes, but if I get called, I'm never good. So something like pocket 6s, pocket 5s. And the last category I actually think is sets here, as sets can still make nut hands by the river, and I fold out some of the weaker flushes. Folds around to tie and he makes the call. I think the majority of his range is going to be medium flushes here. I expect him to be checking a second time with some of his stronger flushes, but those will be leading the turn at some frequency, where I think a lot of his medium flushes are just going to be playing a check call. He's also going to have some of those 2-pair and set combos that can improve. We go heads up to the river, which is the 5 of spades. He checks to me and I want to continue being very polarized here, essentially saying I have the ace of clubs. On these 4 flush boards, I think you generally just want to be using large sizes. I overbet him last hand as a bluff, so we're going to try it again, but this time for value. I continue for $1,100. Unfortunately, he doesn't take too long before folding. I open this above average hand from under the gun. Ethan makes the call on the cutoff, and Richard makes the call on the button. The flop is the 6 of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 6 of clubs. The check is perfectly fine on this flop, but I decide to continue for $90. Ethan makes the call. He's going to have a lot of pocket pairs here. He's going to have a lot of 7x. He's going to have a little bit of 6x, but I think some of that is going to be raising. Although I think he's going to be raising his 6x at a slightly lower frequency. There's a lot of draws on this board as well. A ton of straight draws that he can have, as well as flush draws, and I think the majority of those are going to be playing as a call. The Comet King bumps it up to $325, a relatively small raise size given my c-bet sizing, with a player calling behind, especially on the sweat board, but the pot is already bloated because we were multi-way. Pocket 7s and 6x are the most obvious value hands, but I do think he's going to be raising here with some of his overpairs. If he did flat pre-flop with something like 10s, 9s, or 8s, and as already stated, there's a ton of draws here. I think it's very likely that he has a lot of open-enders here. He's going to have the 9-8 and the 5-4 suited at the very least. He should have quite a few flush draws here, with both clubs being lower cards and him being being on the button with a slightly wider range. Although I don't love seeing a raise here on this paired board, I think aces is just too strong, especially with the ace of clubs. Yes, I block some of his draws, but I can also pick up additional equity. As I make the call and Ethan folds, we go heads up to the turn with the pot at $875, and the turn is the 9 of clubs, giving me the nut flush draw along with my overpair. I check, and the Comet King decides to check back. I think the vast majority of his flushes would be continuing here, as well as his full houses, pocket 9s, 7s, and 7-6. I would expect a lot of his 6x to continue barreling here as well, but with the third club, I think it's perfectly fine to check back. If he did have one of those overpairs on the flop, like pocket 10s or pocket 8s, I would expect those to be checking back very often. If he had a straight draw like 10-9 or 9-8, he's also going to be checking back. In addition to something like a7 or 8-7. The river is a king of diamonds. I still have a pretty marginal hand. Even with the ace of clubs, I don't think I want to turn my hand into a bluff, as I do have a ton of showdown. I think for the most part, I have two options here, using a small sizing or checking. I decided to go for a very small sizing of $225, about a quarter pot. My thought process is that even though the 6x is very likely in my opponent's range, they're also going to have hands like pocket 10s, pocket 8s, 9-8, ace-7, all which will make a crying call. I don't think too many of those hands are going to be turning themselves into bluffs, although it's definitely possible. If I check facing a bet, I'm generally going to be calling anyways, although maybe my hand just has less showdown value at that point and I should turn it into a bluff. But if I think my opponent does have a 6x combo, they will be betting river here, and they'll be using a larger size than my $225. So I do save some money if they do have a 6x combo if I was calling anyways. Overall, I think this small blocker bet accomplishes a lot. My opponent does make the call and he flips over 10-6 suited, which is slightly wider than I expected him to be, but it works out very well for him in this hand. The Comet King opens this one to $75 over a $40 straddle. I'm not sure he realized the straddle was in play at the time. Ty 3-bets to $250. Ty is a very aggressive and active 3-better. I've seen him 3-bet as wide as wheel ace-x combos. I like to have pocket 9s on the button, and I think against this specific configuration, I want to be 4-betting pocket 9s. I bump it up to $625. I expect to get a ton of folds from Ty, and even if the Comet King has a somewhat stronger hand, I think it's pretty hard for him to continue versus a cold 4-bet. Things kind of go out the window as it folds around to the big blind and he shoves all in for 11-10. Not what I was expecting from the blinds. The 5-bet's going to be extremely strong, especially coming from chairman. I've already put in the majority of his stack, and there's quite a bit of dead money there, so I don't think I have any other option except for calling here. Really hoping I'm flipping here as we run out 2 boards in this $2,500 pot. Thankfully, he does have ace-king, and we are flipping. We run out 2 boards. The first board is the 10 of spades, king of clubs, 7 of hearts, 5 of diamonds, 3 of hearts, giving him top pair, top kicker, and he takes down the first board. The second board is the 4 of diamonds, king of spades, ace of hearts, jack of spades, 2 of diamonds, and he ends up winning this flip on the second board as well. All things considered, it ended up being a pretty good spot, and I end up flipping here, but it doesn't work out. We once again have a $40 straddle, and the Comet King opens this one up to $150 from the hijack. I looked down at ace queen of hearts in the small blind, and I 3-bet to $500. I think in hindsight, I would have used a slightly smaller sizing. I want to be using larger sizes out of position, but it's kind of awkward with this stack to pot ratio. Comet King does continue here. He's going to have a lot of broadways, some suited ace-x combos, some suited connectors, and pocket pairs. I would expect a relatively standard continuing range given the stack to pot ratio, but as we've seen, he's been a little bit wider this session, so he probably has a few more of the offsuit broadways and suited connected hands. The flop is the 9 of clubs, 7 of hearts, 3 of clubs, giving me the overs and the backdoor flush draw. I think check's perfectly fine, but at this stack to pot ratio, I don't think I'm folding against the Comet King, and I decided to shove for his remaining $810. Slightly more than I thought, but it's fine. Overall, I'm still doing very well against his range. Even against his made hands, I have a decent amount of equity, and I think I do deny a lot of equity versus some of his overcards, his ace-x combo, some of his suited connectors, and I might fold out some of his weaker pairs. He turns the 2 of hearts, giving me the flush draw, but it bricks out on the river with the 8 of diamonds. I show ace high, and he ends up flipping over jack 8 of spades, so he had a gutter and 1 overcard, but his pair draw was live, and he ends up hitting the 8 on the river. So I did get it in very good, but he scoops this 2.7k pot. Ty opens this one to $60. I 3-bet ace-9 of spades from the cutoff to $175. Again, Ty has a pretty wide range, especially from later positions. Although I can call this hand, I think it performs better as a 3-bet. He makes the call and we go heads up to the flop, which is the 7 of diamonds, 5 of spades, ace of hearts, giving me top pair. He checks to me and I'm going to be mixing some of my ace-6 combos here, especially some of the medium strength ones. This allows me to gain value from some of his weaker combos on later streets, as well as bluff catch. The turn is the 4 of hearts, and Ty decides to lead out here for $125. Pretty small bet sizing. I think he's going to have some worse ace-x combos here, as well as some weaker pairs, especially if they have draws. The hands like 8-7, 7-6, pocket 6s that have that straight draw. He's also going to have a fair number of flush draws, which can also include the 7 or 5 of hearts. And I wouldn't be surprised if he uses small sizes here with some of his monsters, his 2-pair combos and sets, as my range is really weighted towards strong pocket pairs under the ace. I think I just have a pretty standard call here in position. I do make the call and we go to the turn, which is the queen of hearts, bringing in that backdoor flush. And Ty decides to bomb it here, betting $800 into the $600 pot, really polarizing to flushes and possibly straights. Although to be fair, there's really not that many natural straights. The sizing definitely applies a lot of pressure to my specific hand. I'm definitely in a scenario where I'm bluff catching now instead of having a value hand. Versus the smaller size, I'd have an easy call, but facing 800, this is not an easy decision. A good portion of his bluffs on the turn are going to be those heart combos. That draw obviously came in. His other bluffs are going to be hands like 7-6 and pocket sixes, and I'm not sure how often he's going to be betting turn and then over betting river. The most obvious bluff is something like 9-8 suited, which I obviously block. I don't have a particularly good bluff catcher. If we expand his value region to 2-pair combos, there's an argument this is a better hand to call than something like pocket kings, pocket jacks, but I think I still do prefer some of those combos if they do have a heart. Ultimately, I decided there wasn't enough bluffs, especially if I expanded his value range, so I do make the fold here. Regardless, well played by him. I open up pocket tens from early position. It folds around to Ethan in the small blind. He makes the call. Comet King makes the call in the big blind, and Ty makes the call in the straddle. We go forwards to the flop, which is the 3 of hearts, 8 of diamonds, 6 of diamonds. A very good board for pocket tens as I still retain my overpair. It checks to me and I continue for half pot. With these players being in the blinds, I expect them to connect with this board texture a lot more often. I definitely want to gain value with my hand, but I also think I deny a little bit of equity here versus overcards. Only Ethan continues with a call. I think most of his pairs will be continuing here, and I expect most of his draws to continue with a call as well. He'll be mixing in a lot of raise with his sets and his strongest draws. We go heads up to the turn, which is the 3 of diamonds. Not the turn card I was looking for, as Ethan's diamond draws as well as his 3x combos get there. He checks, and I don't think there's quite as much value to gain with my hand. I've already denied quite a bit of equity. This might have been a mistake as the river is the 8 of hearts, and I see an absolute nightmare of a run out. Ethan pro bets the river for $225. There's not a lot of bluffs here, and I think he's under bluffing if anything, so I think I just have a trivial fold. Not much I could do in this spot. I open 10-9 of spades in middle position. Tim 3-bets me to $160. This is definitely a hand that should be mixing fold out of position, especially versus this size. But we are still relatively deep, and I think I can find opportunities to win post-flop, so I make the call. We go heads up to the flop, which is the 8 of clubs, queen of spades, 5 of clubs, giving me the gut shot and backdoor flush draw. Facing a bet, I think I have a mandatory continue. I think this is a reasonable hand to play as a check raise. But after I check, Tim does check behind. I think his range is going to consist of a lot of hands like jacks through 9s. Obviously, I block 10s and 9s. As well as a ton of ace-high combos and some other broadways. The turn brings the ace of clubs. The ace is obviously very good for my opponent's range, but I think I have many more flushes. Most of my opponent's flushes in these 3-bet pots are going to be ace-high or Broadway combos, and this card severely diminishes those combos. A lot of his flushes would have also bet flop, where I still have all the flushes in my range. So instead of giving up, I decided to turn my hand into a bluff, and I lead out for $230. My opponent does make the call, which I think is mostly going to be top pair combos, but again, he's going to have some of those pocket jacks, pocket 10s, pocket 9s that do contain a club as well. The river brings the 4th club, which is the 10. It's hard to imagine my pair of 10s is good here, so I think I want to continue with a bluff. It's almost impossible for my opponent to have a made flush here. Possibly ace-king with the king of clubs, or ace-jack with the jack of clubs, but a lot of those are going to be betting flop. I expect king-high, queen-high, and jack-high flushes all to bet flop as well, and that leaves him with just those jacks and 9s. I think for the most part, his range is going to be top pair combos. He might have some 2-pair combos, but either way, he hates this 4th flush card. I still retain most of the flush combos given my line, so I decided to put it in a pretty sizable barrel and bet $600 on the river. My opponent reluctantly folds, and I get this bluff through. I open up ace-king of spades to $120 over the $40 straddle, and it folds all the way to Ethan in the straddle, and he 3-bets to $300. Ethan's a little bit on the tighter side, and especially when he's completing the action, I don't see him 3-bet bluffing me too often here. So although ace-king is a very good 4-betting candidate, I think being in position, especially with the suited combo against this player, it makes a lot more sense to call. The flop gives me top pair on the ace of diamonds, jack of spades, 10 of clubs, and Ethan decides to check it to me. I think he's going to be checking here with some of his ace-king and ace-queen, but primarily his range is going to be pocket kings and pocket queens. If he was as wide as king-queen, ace-jack, or ace-10, I would expect to bet here from him, and then jacks and 10s I would also expect to see bet from. I put out a small bet of $200, expecting to get called by that range, which he does do. The turn brings the 2 of spades, giving me the nut flush draw to go along with my top pair. Ethan checks again, and I size down a little bit, betting $450. Given the stack to pot ratio, he's about $750 behind if he makes the call, setting up a relatively easy river shove if I decide to take that line. Ethan goes extremely deep into the tank. I definitely think my hand's best here, but after tanking for a few minutes, he decides to shove all in for $1,200, which has me second guessing that. Obviously, I have way too much going on here with top pair, nut flush draw, and the gut shot, so I flick in the call. The river brings the 5 of hearts, and he flips over ace-king offsuit, so I was free rolling him on the turn. Unfortunately, the spade didn't come in the river, and we chop this pot. I once again get dealt ace-king, this time in the offsuit variety. I open it to $80 over the early position limp, and I end up getting 5 callers as the button, small blind, big blind, and straddle all call, and then Ethan, the initial limper, also calls. And we go 6 ways to the flop. The flop is the ace of hearts, 3 of clubs, 2 of diamonds. About the best you can hope for when you flop top pair against 5 other players. Extremely dry board, and I should still have the best hand here the vast majority of the time. It checks to me, and I continue with a bet of $180, expecting to get called by worse ace-x combos, but as well as hands like pocket 4s, pocket 5s. If my opponents do have 2 pair, a set, or a straight, I think I'll hear from it a lot here. So I think this bet gains a lot of information as well. Sam makes the call on the button and Chairman makes the call on the big blind. With both of them flatting my c-bet, I'm still pretty comfortable here with top pair, top kicker. We go through ace of the turn, which is the ace of clubs, severely limiting their range of value, as well as giving me additional outs versus some of the hands that are beating me. And most importantly, if my opponent does have an ace-x combo, I think there's a lot of opportunity to gain value here. I think it's very likely that one of them does have an ace-x combo, as we went 6 ways to the flop, and both of them continued versus a c-bet. Because of that, I continue with a barrel of $525, but they both fold, so there's no value to be had. I'm not sure what Chairman had. It sounds like Sam had pocket fives. So I still gained a little bit here on the last hand of the night, especially with 6 players still flop, so I'll take it. Not quite the result I was hoping for. I thought I played well for the most part, but definitely some spots to improve on. I think next time I'm going to try to win some of those all-ins, and that should increase the profit. As always, I appreciate everyone tuning in. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment below. I'll see everyone again shortly. Thanks.